if you're a sports fan, you'll know that there's some players that are really easy to cheer for and some that are really easy to cheer against. If you think about the world of hockey, the NHL, there's guys around like Patrick Marleau, super easy to cheer for the guy, right? Doesn't matter what team he's playing on. He's a good hard worker. He's a team leader. He's kind of one of the older guys in the locker room by now, nearing the end of his career, and it just seems like whatever team he goes to, he's well loved. He makes the team better, and you just root for the guy. You want to see him succeed. There's other guys like Brad Marchand who really aren't that easy to cheer for. Now, me and Pastor Owen disagree on this. He thinks Brad Marchand plays a great style of hockey. He drives me absolutely up the wall, and he's sort of one of those love it or hate it kind of guys, but he's an aggravator, right? His mission as a hockey player is to get under the skin of his opponents, and he does this really well, but he makes it somebody who's just desperately hard to want to see succeed, in my opinion. And so often if he gets called for a penalty or somebody just has enough of his antics and decks him, you just kind of cheer a little bit and you say, yes, he's reaping what he sowed, right? And he deserved that. He earned that based on how he has played the game to this point. As we get further into Habakkuk chapter 2 this week, we're going to see the first of 2 weeks focusing on certain statements that are made by God through Habakkuk concerning primarily the Babylonians, but it also applies to the people in Judah and has some application for us today as well. And these are called the woes. W-O-E, the woes, or depending on your translation, it might say something like, what sorrow awaits, and then it'll go on and talk about these people. And there's 4 of them that are talked about here in Habakkuk chapter 2. We're going to look at the first 2 today. The first 2 both have to do with people who make their fortunes basically by oppressing others, in the Babylonians' case by wiping out other nations, right, and being very violent and very vicious and very cruel as they did this. And so they amassed a whole bunch of wealth and prosperity, and in their minds security, by doing this. And so they heaped up wealth, which is what the first woe deals with. Woe to those who heap up wealth. It kind of goes on from there. And the second one talks about woe to those who build their houses on high, and it sort of gives this picture of an eagle who builds its nest way up high, and it seems invincible based on the oppressive nature of what they've done. And what God wants Habakkuk to understand is that for the Babylonians, yes, they're vicious, yes, they're winning right now, but they will in time pay in kind for what they've done. And what I mean by that is they've made their living off of oppressing people. They've made their fortune off of that. But what God wants Habakkuk to understand is that the time will come when those who they have oppressed in this way will rise up and do to Babylon what Babylon has done to them. They won't be the top dog in the area for that long. They will, in fact, in God's own good timing, pay for what they have done. And yes, they've oppressed people and they've been very vicious, very violent, and that will all come back on them. They will reap what they have sown. We just came through harvest season here in southwestern Saskatchewan, and thankfully as we look outside the truck here, it's nice and snowy, but I think most people are done. But think about it in harvest terms, you reap what you sow, right? If you plant a field full of lentils, I mean, if everything goes as according to plan, you will harvest lentils. But if you, for whatever reason, would decide, I'm going to seed a bunch of wild oats and hawksbeard this year, that is going to be what you harvest, right? That will be what you reap based on what you've sown. And that's exactly what's going to happen to the Babylonians. But it's what we can understand from this is that same principle holds true today, and it would have held true to the Judeans as well. If you remember back to the start of the book of Habakkuk, Habakkuk's first complaint was laid at people of his own nation who weren't living in a way that honors God. And what we can see through this is the punishment for them. What they're going to reap from that is the fact that the Babylonians are going to come, and just like they've withheld justice and oppressed people, the Babylonians are going to come and do that same thing to them. The next level is that what the Babylonians are doing to the Judeans, the Israelite people who live in Judah, is going to happen to them as well. And we take this principle today and we can maybe start to understand and see that these same things hold true today. God still cares about people who are oppressed, and the people who make their fortunes by oppressing others, by dealing unjustly, by manipulating and all these different sorts of things. In time, they will have to answer for that. Now, whether they answer for that on this side of eternity or at the judgment seat of Christ, I mean, God alone knows that, but we can rest assured that people will have to answer for that. And so that's comforting on one level. When we see that happening in the world around us, we can know that, okay, God will deal with this. but it's also challenging for our own hearts as well to make sure that we're dealing honorably, whether it's in the business world, whether it's relationally. It's very easy to build ourselves up, whether that's our bank account or just our own self-esteem and pride. It's very easy to build ourselves up by tearing others down. And what we see here in Habakkuk chapter 2 is that God recognizes that, he sees it, and the promise is there, the idea is there that you will reap what you have sown. In God's good timing, it will happen. And so for Habakkuk, this would have been an encouragement as he considered that this would happen to the Babylonians, but there's also a little bit more of a subtle challenge there to God's own people to make sure that they are living honorably in that way as well. Lots to think about. Next week we're going to get into the second two of the woes in Habakkuk chapter 2, and then we're going to finally get to the little bit more hopeful stuff at the end of the passage. I hope you have a great Tuesday, and we will talk to you again soon.